Hello, here's Stefan from the MAXQDA team. Warmly welcome to our MAXQDA webinar today about the new MAXQDA module called Stats. Please let me explain what MAXQDA Stats is and what MAXQDA Stats offers. MAXQDA Stats is a standalone statistics module that is fully integrated into MAXQDA. So MAXQDA Stats offers frequently used descriptive and inferential statistical methods, and I have listed them all here to go into detail. Of course, you can create frequency tables with MAXQDA Stats. Also, you can compute descriptive statistics, which mean you can calculate values like the mean, the standard deviation, quartiles, the standard error, or the 95% confidence interval for the mean. In addition to this, you can create crosstabs where you can display absolute and relative frequencies, you can display row and column percentages, or the standardized residuals, for example. And furthermore, you can calculate the chi-square value or the phi, Kramer's V, contingency coefficient C. So you have all the typical values for crosstabs integrated into MAXQDA Stats 2. If you want to perform a one-way analysis of variance, you can do it with MAXQDA Stats 2. The ANOVA procedure offers the output descriptive statistics and includes a Levene test of homogeneity of variance. So you have all the values you need to perform an ANOVA. We are very happy to integrate the correlation procedure into MAXQDA Stats 2, so you will be able to calculate Pearson and Spearman rank correlation. And we are very proud about the functions we have integrated for creating a scale where you can work with Cronbach's alpha, and I will show you this in detail later. Please note that you can analyze data from your MAXQDA project, which means concretely that you can transfer the document variables from a MAXQDA project into the stats module, and you can transfer the code frequencies per document into MAXQDA Stats to analyze them statistically. You can also import data in SPSS and Excel format, so you can import data from nearly every statistical package like Stater, SAS, etc. to analyze data from external files. So this is a complete standalone statistics module where you can calculate lots of frequencies, descriptive statistics, etc. for external files. And of course, if you have a paper and pencil survey, for example, you can import or enter data on your own and analyze this self-entered data in MAXQDA Stats. So let's have a look at MAXQDA, where we will start. MAXQDA that contains data from an online survey that was conducted about the topic financial crisis. So we have the answers of 191 persons. So we have the answers of them stored here in 191 documents. In each document we have the information about open-ended questions here in the document browser. And these open-ended questions, or the answers to these open-ended questions, are coded with a code system that is shown here. And we have also standardized data, which is shown in the data editor. But let's have a look at the code system before we go into the standardized data. For example, we have here the responses to question 2, how have the people been affected by the crisis, the financial crisis, and here is what we have coded there. That some have lost their jobs, some are affected in their families, etc. we have a question about whose fault was it that there was a financial crisis. And if somebody canceled the holidays, for example, or was affected for big purchases due to the financial crisis. In addition to the open-ended questions, there are some standardized questions and standardized answers that are integrated here in the data editor. We have the variable marital status, age group, region, and employment status. So if we take a deeper look for respondent to respondent 2, we see that this person is widowed, is between 70 and 79 years old, lives in a rural region, and has already been retired. There is also a variable here that is called job security scale, which values have a range from 0 to 4. 0 means that the job security scale is very low, they don't feel very secure, or the 4, which means they feel very secure. Now, with this data editor in mind, I will go to the new menu entry here, Stats, that is shown left to the MAXQDA menu. There are several options here to start the Stats module, and I want to start Stats with all documents because I have no document activated and no codes activated. So you can only start Stats for all documents and include all codes into Stats. When I start it, you see that the MAXQDA window is hidden now. I can move the window around and the MAXQDA window won't appear because it is hidden in the background, and the complete MAXQDA interface has been changed to the MAXQDA Stats interface, which has a different menu. For example, we have the menu entries File, View, Transform, etc. here, which all allow us to start statistical procedures. If you look at the table of the data editor, what you see here, you may recognize that it contains the same data that I've shown you before in the data editor of MAXQDA. So the data editor is here completely transferred to MAXQDA Stats, and I can work with it now here. In the data editor, each case, which are numbered here, form a row, and all the variables here form the columns. Please note that here the same person, the respondent 2, is listed who is 70 to 79 years old. The cases all are numbered, and the overall number of cases is shown here at the bottom. We have 191 cases here in the Stats module. In the data editor, you can see, for example, for the job security scale, that we have the values 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and here we have 2 missing values where we have used the number 99. In the variables list, you see an interface that is familiar to you if you're working with statistical packages. We have the variable name, which may contain spaces and which may contain special characters because we have the compatibility to MAXQDA projects. We have also the variable label where you can enter a special label or a longer label up to 255 characters, which is necessary if you're working with external data. We have the same variable types like you are used to in MAXQDA. We have the text variables, we have date and time variables, we have integer, floating point, and Boolean variables. We can here enter value labels and we can enter missing values. And as you can see here for the job security scale, MAXQDA Stats has already entered the 99 here, missing values, because this value has already been set as a missing value in MAXQDA, and it has been transferred to MAXQDA Stats when it was started for the first time. If you look here at the bottom, you can see that you can switch between the data editor, the variable list, just by a click, and later on we will concentrate on the output viewer, where which is the place to save all the created result views and the created charts. So let's start with the first statistics procedure, the frequencies. The frequencies are available under the menu Descriptive Statistics, and here we have a selection window for variables, which is very familiar to the ones you may know from MAXQDA before. Here all the variables are listed, and I choose the marital status, the age group, and the variable job security scale. And then here is one unique feature that we have integrated into MAXQDA, because you see here is not just a tab for the variables but also a tab for the codes. You may imagine that all the code frequencies have been transferred to MAXQDA Stats 2. So if you're familiar with the function transform into document variable, you can imagine that in the background MAXQDA Stats has done or has computed this procedure for every code, so we have all the codes here in MAXQDA Stats available. I will integrate the code not affected to produce a frequency table that contains the information how many people have been not affected by the financial crisis. I start the procedure with a click on OK, and here is the result table. This is a typical frequency table which is showing the missing values here, which is showing the variable, the values for the variable here, the married, partner, single, and widowed. We see here the frequency for each group, and we can switch to the next frequency table by clicking on the button Next, or by choosing a frequency table from the drop-down list here. All the variables for which I have created a frequency table is displayed here. So what is displayed here? Job security scale has a range from 0 to 4. 42 people have a very low job security scale. These are 22%, and this means there are 22.2 valid percents because we have 2 missing values here. Please note that the whole frequency table is interactive. So if I look at this table, I see here is a missing system row which contains 0 values. It has no necessary information. I can right-click on it and delete it. So you see, this is an interactive table with undo and redo functions, so I can undo the deletion of this row, or I can redo it with just a single mouse click. Here we have a variable that is an integer, so we can calculate descriptive statistics too, and as you are or maybe used to from MAXQDA frequency tables, you will get a similar window which contains these descriptive statistics like 2.11 for the mean for this variable. Please note that there is another option for interactive work with result views. I can select 2 rows at once, for example the highest values here, and say I want to merge these both values. If you look at the table, it will be recalculated at once. So now this row contains the values 3 and 4, And this is a very unique feature of MAXQDA Stats. So the whole interactive integration of statistical procedures in the result views can be performed here by right clicks and by deletion or by combining, merging rows. Of course, you want to integrate these result views that you have created into your reports. Here you have the option to copy this result view to the clipboard. You may now open a Word window and you can integrate it just by choosing paste into your Word document, and you see it's already layouted for presentation. If you want to save it into MAXQDA Stats first, all the result views that you have created, you can use these two icons here, and if you click on the first one, the result table will be transferred into the output viewer. Or if you choose the second button, all created frequency tables will be transferred to the result, to the output viewer at once. You can see here for each transfer, MAXQDA Stats creates a new entry in this tree view here on the left in the output viewer. If you click on any of these entries, the window will scroll to the frequency table and will highlight it, and you can copy it from here, or you can select all created tables, all created or all included tables into the output viewer and copy them at once by using this icon here at the top. For now we have talked about frequency tables, but you see here also an option for creating chart views. So if you click on the chart view symbol, you switch into the view for diagrams. Please note that you can resize the window of the chart by just resizing it with the mouse. You can switch between the different variables and codes again by using the blue arrows next to the drop-down menu. And here is the result for the code that we have integrated into our statistical procedure. Here we can see that 8.4% have not been affected, but 91.6% have been affected by the financial crisis in our survey. You can also include these charts into the output viewer just with a single click, and MAXQDA Stats will integrate it here, or you can copy it to the clipboard and integrate it into Word as shown before. Let's continue with the next statistical function, which you can find in the Descriptive Statistics menu again. It's called the Descriptive Statistics function and allows you to create lots of statistics, to compute lots of statistics like the minimum, the variance, the median, or the standard error for all integer and floating point variables, and of course for codes if you are interested in it. Please note that we have two options here in the bottom that we have included into our window here. We can say exclude cases listwise, which means that only those values or only those cases will be integrated into the calculation that have a valid value for all of the selected variables. We know that job security scale has two missing values, so the cases with these two missing values will be excluded from the calculations for the number of coded segments too, if I select this option. The second option, save standardized set values in new variables, can be selected if you want to standardize the variables that you have selected or the codes that you have selected into a new variable. For example, if you want to compare the distribution of variables and codes, you can use this set standardization for comparison. After clicking OK, Here you see that the set variables have been created, and here the new frequency table has been computed. Now the variable here forms a row, and here are the selected values. And again, I can insert this data into the output viewer. Let's go ahead and have a look at the next menu. It's the Compare Groups menu, and it contains two functions that we have integrated here and which are very common in statistical analytics. The first one is the crosstabs, and the second one is the analysis of variance. I will start with the crosstabs procedure, and we'll have a look at the codes, where it was coded if a person has lost a job or not. And here again you can see that the power of MAXQDA Stats is that you combine codes and variables into one crosstab. So you can select the jobs lost as the rows, as the variable for the row, and I select some, let's say, independent variables like the region and the age group for the columns. I start the procedure with a click on OK, and you see it's calculated very fast. Here we see the first table that contains the information jobs lost and region. The question is if there is a correlation between these two variables, and here we have listed the absolute frequencies, but this is not very informative. So we have a second drop-down menu here where we can add additional information to the cells. I select the column percentages, and here I see that 71%, or let's go here in the second row, it's easier to for interpretation. We have 29% who live in rural areas who have lost their jobs, and only 14% in urban regions who have lost their job, which is a big difference. If this difference is statistically significant, you can check by calculating these chi-square values, and the phi, contingency coefficient C, and Cramer's V can be used for interpretation of how high the correlation between the two variables is. There is another option which I want to show you, but I will switch to the second crosstab that we have created here. Because here is another option which you can switch on, and which means that you highlight the cells with high standardized residuals. If you click on it, MAXQDA will highlight the cells that have a standardized residual higher than 2 or lower than -2. Here we have only 4 persons who are aged between 60 and 69 who have lost their jobs, which is very less. It's only 7% around. And all the others are higher, except this column, which is not very interesting for our table, so I should delete it. But there is no, and it's recalculated here again if you see it. So if I delete a column here, the whole table is recalculated, which is very helpful because only one person here is not good statistically way. Of course, you can transfer these created crosstabs into the output viewer, or you can copy them again to the clipboard to integrate them into your report. Let's say I want to know what are these people, the 4 people. I want to dive into detail with these 4 people. Then I'll show you the next very interesting feature of MAXQDA Stats, which allows a very deeply integration of quantitative and qualitative analysis. I can click on this cell and say I want to save these 4 people as a document set, which means save as document set now. And MAXQDA Stats has now saved these 4 documents, or these 4 persons, which are presented in this cell as document set. If I close MAXQDA Stats, this window will appear where I have 3 options. The first option is that I can select if I want to update the document variables of my MAXQDA project. So if I did not change any values, so I can deselect it. I can select if I want to insert new document variables in MAXQDA project. So if I keep the selection, the newly created Z values will be transferred to the MAXQDA project. And here is the main point of integration. Here is the option that I can save these 4 documents that are lying behind this cell as a document set. If I click OK, MAXQDA will create this new set here with the 4 people that are aged between 60 and 69 and have lost their jobs. So I can go into detail, I can continue with my analysis. What have they said? Why are they affected? What has happened to these special age group? And I can go into detail with my analysis. I restart Stats for all documents to show you the next option. It's called Analysis of Variance and offers the possibility to create an ANOVA, and I will choose the job security scale as the dependent variable because it is interval variable, and I will choose the age group as a factor. As you remember, the age group has one group from which contains only a few persons, so it is no wonder that the homogeneity of variance test here shows that the variances of the factor groups are very different. I can check this by click on this button and I will get this descriptive statistics window, which shows the descriptive statistic for each factor group, for each age group here. The 70 to 79 persons only contain 1 person and the standard deviation here is 0. Here the standard deviation is very high, so it might be helpful to exclude the age group 60 to 69 and the age group 70 to 79 from our calculation. To do so, I go to the variable list, I go to the job security scale variable, and I can, I go to the age group variable, and I can enter missing values here. Usually you are used to that you can enter just numbers into the missing values, but here in MAXQDA we have integrated the option that you can enter text variables as well. So I include the group 60 to 69 and 70 to 79 to exclude them from our calculation. Here you see these groups are defined as missing values now, and I've done this for this text variable. On each result view you will find this arrow which produces a refresh. The window will come up again. I say OK, and all the table is being recalculated. You see now the homogeneity of variance test has a p-value that is higher than 5%, so it might be okay for this pre-assumption for doing an ANOVA. We see here that the p-value for our ANOVA is too high, so we have to say that the job security scale can't be explained by each group. I want to continue to show you the functions for correlations, where you can choose between Pearson and Spearman, but I will do this with a new data set. As I said at the beginning of this webinar, MAXQDA Stats allows you to work with the document variables and the code frequencies per document for a MAXQDA project, but also offers you the option to open SPSS files and Excel files. If you open an external file, MAXQDA will ask you if you want to transfer the opened data to MAXQDA, because you will lose this data if you don't do it, but I haven't changed any values, so it's not necessary. And I will open this new data file, which contains 2034 values, and you see here this is an SPSS file about the environmental awareness with value labels from 1 to 5. I do not agree at all to I do agree at all. We have 12 items here included into our variable list, and I can start the correlation between, let's say, the first 7 variables, and the result is a typical view for a typical matrix, and which contain in each cell the Pearson's error are the p-value and the number of valid cases for each cell. As you can see, all the data correlates together because this was an item, we call it item battery, so there are lots of correlation here, and there are higher and lower correlations. Here we have a very high correlation of 0.437. But to check if we have a valid correlation or if we shouldn't calculate any correlations, we have also integrated a chart view to check if it looks good. And you see here that we have a lot of information here, but we have lots of values here, persons, documents here, so it might be interesting to go into detail here for the correlation analysis. So let's come to the interesting point of building a scale. We have integrated this reliability analysis with the calculation of Cronbach's alpha, and I want to show you the options, and I will use all the 12 items that have already been recoded here, because some of them are the values should be recoded because the 1 and the 5 mean different agreement than the other items. So here we have the 12 items listed. At the first column we see the number of items integrated into the scale. We have some informations about the here in the table. For example, we have the mean that we will get for the scale if we exclude the item. This is interesting if you want to check if there is an item included that has a very different mean than the others. And the interesting value is here in the third column because it is the corrected item scale correlation, and MAXQDA automatically highlights the row with the lowest correlation. Here we have a correlation that is 0.225, which is very low, and we see here if we exclude this item from the list how high Cronbach's alpha will be. Now it is 0.779, and you can see all this information at one point. This is very easy in this software, and it will increase to 0.788 if we delete this item. As you may already know, you can delete this item just with a single click, and the whole table is recalculated, and now the lowest value is here 0.315, which might be okay, and if we would exclude it, Cronbach's alpha would decrease again, so it might be good to keep it in the scale. We have also the option that you can build the scale and save it as a new variable. I will switch to the data editor because this will make it easier to understand what will happen. I will switch up the variable label so that you can see the value label so that you can see here the values for each item. And if I click on this icon here, I can give it a new name, and I can say I want to calculate it as the mean. And now for each row a scale will be computed, and it is the mean of all the variable values. You don't have to type in syntax or use the transform menu. It is already done for you automatically. Of course, we have also integrated descriptive statistics, so if you are interested in the descriptive statistics for single items or the total scale that would be built by summation or that would be built by calculating the mean, we have integrated it here into this table where you can evaluate which item might be not too interesting or has not a big range, for example. Yeah, this was my presentation here for the functions inside MAXQDA, but I want to show you one special feature because you can save the data that you have in MAXQDA stats, even if it doesn't matter if you have an external file opened or if you started stats with the document variables from a MAXQDA project. You can save it as an SPSS file, or you can export it as Excel. Just please note that when you export it to SPSS, you have to choose a new name, so you won't be able to use the same name for an existing file, and it won't happen that you overwrite an existing file. So another notice, if you import an SPSS file like we did here, the recognition of variable types will be the same as set in your SPSS file, and there are some things you should know. For example, there are only 63 characters that will be imported for text variables from SPSS files. Another option here is that you can transform data. This is not a typical statistical procedure for creating result views, but it is but you have the option to compute new variables, where you have the option to use these functions like average, sum, square root, round, plus, minus, etc. And each variable here is integrated and can easily be integrated into the calculation. You will already get the information if the numerical expression that you have typed into this window is valid or is not valid. So until it is not valid, the OK button will be grayed out. Please note that as in MAXQDA, we also integrated help buttons. So if you click on this help icon, you will start the MAXQDA stats help file. You will get here information about the variable list, and we have integrated information for each single function of MAXQDA stats here. So if you want to know how system-defined missings are working in MAXQDA stats, just have a look at the MAXQDA reference manual that is displayed online when you click on the blue info button. I switch now again to my presentation here, and here I have another slide where I want to summarize the things that I have explained about MAXQDA stats. I think you can use stats to analyze standalone quantitative data if you are working with external files and use the SPSS Excel import. Of course, you can use it for mixed methods approaches when you work with external SPSS files. But if you have the same persons where you have conducted survey or other data and you have standardized also as qualitative data for the same persons, you can work with the MAXQDA project and you can perform lots of mixed methods approaches and answer questions like the following. For example, you can answer the question which combinations of document variables, region and marital status for example, are rare and which are common. You might use the crosstabs function to do so. If you have questions like, is there a difference between websites of commercial and non-commercial organizations regarding the frequency of qualitative codes like transparency, you can use the ANOVA or the crosstabs function of MAXQDA stats. Another typical question might be, does the use of codes in different documents follow a similar distribution? I've shown you the set standardization for code frequencies for this question. Another option might be, how strong is the correlation between the standardized index for environmental awareness and its qualitative thematic equivalent code? For example, we have often discovered big differences when we conducted a survey and asked, how often have you visited our lecture? And when we ask the same people and in an interview and compared their answers, there are lots of differences between the standardized answers and the information we get from qualitative data when we ask for the same topics. So, are there any open questions from your side regarding the functionality?